A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1, Shadows and Ash. The castle stood silent under a moonless sky when Torsten arrived 3 days ahead of schedule. His patrol along the northern territories had concluded faster than anticipated. No signs of encroachment. No rival packs testing boundaries. The peace should have been comforting. But his wolf remained restless beneath his skin, pacing with an unease he could not name. Rather than wake the guards at the main gate, Torsten approached through the eastern path that led to the service entrance near the kitchens. His boots made no sound on the frost-hardened earth. Years of tracking prey had taught him how to move through darkness without disturbing it. The leather and furs he wore, traditional vestments of his position, carried the scent of pine smoke and winter wind. He was Alpha King. Not merely lord of one pack, but sovereign over all shifter territories from the Iron Mountains to the coastal cliffs. At 32, he had held this authority for 5 years, ever since his father fell defending their borders. 3 years ago, he lost his Luna to an ambush. Since then, something vital had been missing, a hollowness that no amount of duty could fill. The kitchen door opened without resistance. He stepped into warmth and the lingering smell of bread baked hours earlier. The great hearth dominated one wall, its stones blackened by generations of use. Torsten expected emptiness at this hour, the hour between midnight and dawn, when even the most diligent servant slept. Instead, he found her. A young woman knelt before the hearth, her back to him as she scraped ash from the stones with methodical precision. She wore a simple dress of undyed linen, the fabric thin and worn, patched in several places. Her dark hair hung in a braid down her spine, strands escaping to frame a face he could only see in profile. She worked quickly, silently, as though afraid to disturb the night itself. Torsten recognized her immediately. Sable, daughter of Beta Ulrich, his father's most trusted advisor and now his own. He had seen her occasionally over the years, always in the background, always silent. She rarely attended gatherings, and when she did, she remained at the edges, eyes downcast. He realized with uncomfortable clarity that he knew almost nothing about her beyond her name and parentage. He took a step forward, intending to announce his presence rather than startle her. But the floorboard creaked beneath his weight. Sable's reaction was immediate and visceral. She jerked upright, spinning toward the sound. The movement pulled her dress tight across her shoulders, and the worn fabric tore further at the seam. The right side of her bodice fell away, exposing her shoulder and the upper curve of her back. What Torsten saw made his wolf surge forward with sudden, violent fury. Her skin was a landscape of brutality. Fresh welts, angry and red, crossed older scars that had healed white and raised. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone with military training. These were not accidental injuries. These were deliberate, systematic, administered with precision designed to cause maximum pain while avoiding permanent damage to vital areas. Sable gasped, her green eyes wide with terror as she recognized him. She grabbed at the torn fabric, trying desperately to cover herself, but her hands shook so violently she could barely hold it in place. "Your Majesty," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. She dropped into an awkward curtsy, wincing as the movement pulled at her injuries. "I did not know you had returned. I was just finishing the hearth before morning. I will leave at once." "Stop." Torsten's voice came out harder than he intended. His wolf was too close to the surface, responding to the scent of blood and fear that filled the small space. He forced himself to gentle his tone. "Stand up. Do not bow." She obeyed, but kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Her whole body trembled. The fear scent intensified, sharp and acrid. It made something twist painfully in his chest. "How did you get those marks?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. The pattern was too familiar. He had seen it before on soldiers being disciplined for severe infractions. "I fell," Sable said quickly. Too quickly. "Yesterday I fell down the stairs carrying water. It was clumsy of me. Look at me." She flinched at the command but raised her eyes. In the dim firelight, he could see they were a striking green, the color of new leaves in spring. They were also filled with such profound terror that it made his breath catch. This was not the fear of someone caught doing something wrong. This was the fear of someone who expected violence. Those marks were not made by falling, Torsten said carefully. He kept his distance, sensing that if he moved closer she might bolt. Those are whip marks. From a training lash, specifically. The kind used in the practice yards for soldiers who break formation. Her lips pressed together. She said nothing, but her hands twisted in the torn fabric of her dress until her knuckles went white. Who did this to you? No one, Your Majesty. I told you. I fell. Sable. He made her name a gentle question rather than a demand. I can see at least 24 scars on your back. And those are only the ones visible. Some of them are years old. You did not get those from falling. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back with fierce determination. Please, she whispered. Please, I must return home before dawn. If I am late, there will be consequences. The careful phrasing told him everything. Consequences. Not from neglecting her duties, but from someone who monitored her movements. Someone who would punish tardiness. Torsten's hands curled into fists at his sides. His wolf snarled inside his mind, demanding to know who had done this, demanding blood and retribution. He forced the rage down, knowing it would only terrify her further. Turn around, he said quietly. Let me see your back. Your Majesty, please. That was not a request. She turned slowly, lowering the torn fabric completely. What he saw made his vision go red at the edges. The fresh welts were even worse than he had initially thought. Some had broken the skin, leaving thin lines of dried blood, but it was the older scars that truly horrified him. Layers upon layers of them, crisscrossing her entire back from shoulders to waist. Some were thin lines, others thick and ropey from improper healing. This had been happening for years. Many years. Who? The word came out as a growl. His wolf was too close now, pushing against his control. Tell me who did this. Sable's shoulders hunched inward, making herself smaller. I cannot. Cannot or will not. It does not matter. Her voice was barely audible. Please, Your Majesty, I am no one. I am less than no one. What happens to me is of no concern to anyone. I just need to finish my work and go home. Less than no one? Torsten moved closer, unable to stop himself. She tensed but did not flee. You are the daughter of my beta. You are a member of this pack. That makes you very much my concern. My father would not agree with that assessment. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her eyes went wide with horror at her own admission. I did not. Understanding crashed over Torsten with sickening clarity. The military precision of the scars, the access to training weapons, the authority to discipline without question, the careful isolation that had kept her invisible for years. Beta Ulrich, her own father. Show me your arms, he said, his voice deadly calm. Your Majesty, now. She pulled up her sleeves with shaking hands. More scars. Burns from hot metal on her forearms. Bruises in various stages of healing circling her wrists where she had been restrained. The wolf inside Torsten howled for release. He wanted to shift, to hunt, to tear apart whoever had done this, but the girl in front of him was already terrified. If he lost control now, he would only make it worse. You will not return home tonight, he said with absolute finality. There are servant quarters here in the castle. You will sleep there. I cannot. Panic edged into her voice. There will be. Please, Your Majesty, you do not understand. I understand perfectly. Torsten met her eyes, letting her see the cold fury he felt. And I am telling you that you will not leave this castle tonight. That is a direct order from your Alpha King. Do you intend to disobey? She stared at him, trapped between two sources of authority and clearly expecting punishment regardless of which she chose. Finally, she whispered, No, Your Majesty. Good. He moved to the door and called out. A guard appeared within moments, looking surprised to see the king. Escort this woman to the eastern servant quarters. Give her a room with a lock on the inside. She is not to leave, and no one is to disturb her. Post a guard if necessary. The guard glanced at Sable with curiosity, but had the sense not to ask questions. Yes, Your Majesty. Sable looked at Torsten one more time. There was no gratitude in her expression, only exhaustion and resignation. She expected this protection to be temporary. She expected to eventually pay for this night of safety. As the guard led her away, Torsten stood alone in the kitchen. The smell of her blood still hung in the air, mixing with old fear and newer desperation. His wolf circled restlessly, unsatisfied with merely removing her from immediate danger. It wanted more. It wanted justice. It wanted to understand why his wolf cared so much about someone he barely knew. He ran a hand through his dark hair, feeling the weight of his beard against his palm. 3 years since Astrid's death, and he had felt nothing. No interest in potential mates, no desire for connection. He had assumed that part of him had died with her. But standing in this kitchen, looking at the blood-stained ash where Sable had been working, he felt something stir. Not attraction. Not yet. Something more fundamental. A bone-deep certainty that she was important. That what happened to her mattered in ways he could not yet explain. Dawn would come in a few hours. He needed to sleep, to think clearly before taking action. But he knew sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see those scars. Every time he breathed, he would smell that fear. His beta, Ulrich, who had served his father for decades, who had pledged loyalty to Torsten himself, who sat in council meetings and made decisions about pack law and justice. That same man went home and systematically brutalized his own daughter. How many others knew? How many had seen and said nothing? How long had she been invisible, suffering in silence while the rest of them went about their duties? Torsten walked to where she had been kneeling. Her cleaning cloth lay abandoned on the stones, stained with ash and blood where her wounds had seeped through her dress. He picked it up, the fabric rough against his palm. Tomorrow, he would begin asking questions. Tomorrow, he would start unraveling the truth. But tonight, he would stand here in this kitchen and acknowledge a fundamental failure. He was Alpha King. He was supposed to protect his people, and he had not even known one of them needed protecting. His wolf growled low and furious. And for once, Torsten agreed completely. Someone would answer for this. Someone would pay. But first, he needed to understand. And then he needed to make sure Sable never went back to that house again. Chapter 2, Hidden Truths. Torsten did not sleep that night. He stood on the battlements watching the eastern sky gradually lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. Somewhere in the servant quarters below, Sable was either sleeping or lying awake, probably wondering what fresh hell this intervention would bring her. He suspected the latter. People who lived with constant fear did not rest easily. When dawn finally broke across the mountains, he descended to the great hall. Servants were already moving through the corridors, preparing for the day. He watched them with new eyes, wondering how many other invisible sufferers moved among them, how many secrets these stone walls contained. He positioned himself where he could observe the kitchen entrance without being obvious. He needed to see her routine, to understand the scope of what had been hidden in plain sight. Sable appeared shortly after sunrise. She wore a different dress, equally worn and patched, and moved with careful precision that suggested every motion caused pain. She kept her head down as she entered the kitchen, disappearing from his view. He gave her a few minutes, then followed. The kitchen bustled with morning activity. 3 other servants prepared breakfast for the castle's inhabitants, their chatter falling silent when Torsten entered. Sable stood at the far counter, scrubbing vegetables with single-minded focus. She had not looked up when he entered, though her shoulders had tensed slightly. She knew he was there. "Continue your work," Torsten told the others, his tone making it clear this was not a social visit. They obeyed, though he caught nervous glances passing between them. He spent the next hour simply observing. Sable worked without pause, moving from one task to another. When the head cook distributed morning bread to the staff, she took none. When someone asked if she wanted ale, she shook her head silently. She ate nothing, drank nothing, spoke to no one. When one of the male servants passed close behind her carrying firewood, she flinched so violently she nearly dropped the pot she was holding. The man did not even seem to notice, but Torsten noticed. His wolf noticed. Over the following days, he continued his observation while maintaining his regular duties. Council meetings felt interminable when he knew Sable was somewhere in the castle working herself to exhaustion. He found excuses to walk past the kitchens, the laundry, the storerooms where she labored. A pattern emerged. She arrived before dawn and left after dark. She never ate proper meals, only scraps if anything at all. Her movements were those of someone accustomed to making themselves invisible, to taking up as little space as possible. And every single time a man came near her, even in passing, her entire body went rigid with anticipation of violence. On the third day, Torsten sought out the castle's oldest servants. He found Berta in the weaving room, a woman who had served his grandfather. "Tell me about Ulrich's daughter," he said without preamble. Berta's weathered face creased with discomfort. "Sable? She is a quiet girl, Your Majesty. Hard worker. How long has she worked in the kitchens? 8 years, perhaps. Since she was 16. And before that, she lived in her father's house. Rarely saw her at all after her mother passed. When did her mother die? 15 years ago. Childbirth. The babe did not survive either. Berta's fingers stilled on her loom. Ulrich took it hard. Changed him, some said. Changed him how? Became stricter. More focused on honor and discipline. Said the pack had grown too soft. She hesitated. Your Majesty, if I may ask, why these questions about the girl? Answer mine first. Did anyone ever see marks on her? Injuries? Berta's silence was answer enough. You saw, Torsten said flatly, and said nothing. It was not our place. She whispered. Ulrich is Beta. He has authority over his own household. And the girl never complained, never asked for help. What were we to do? Torsten left without responding because he did not trust himself to speak. His wolf raged against the injustice of it. Not just Ulrich's abuse, but the collective failure of everyone who had seen and chosen convenience over compassion. He went to the records room next, pulling dusty volumes that chronicled pack ceremonies and official proceedings. It took him most of the afternoon, but he finally found what he was looking for. 8 years ago, a ceremony of maturity. All young shifters underwent their first formal transformation before the pack at age 16, proving their ability to control the change. It was tradition, celebration, a rite of passage. Sable's entry was brief and clinical. Transformation incomplete. Subject experienced partial shift only, accompanied by severe distress. Ceremony concluded early. Beta Ulrich requests authority to provide private instruction and discipline at home to correct deficiency. The Alpha King at the time, Torsten's father, had granted the request. His signature marked the bottom of the page. Torsten sat back, a sick feeling settling in his stomach. His father had been a good man, a strong leader, but he had trusted Ulrich implicitly, never questioning what discipline might entail. And when Torsten inherited the crown 3 years later, grieving and overwhelmed, he had never thought to review such old cases. Incomplete transformation was not unheard of. Some shifters took longer to develop full control, but it was not shameful, not something requiring isolation and punishment, unless someone wanted an excuse for isolation and punishment. He kept reading. There were no further entries about Sable. It was as if she had ceased to exist as a person after that ceremony, becoming only a kitchen servant whose name appeared occasionally on duty rosters. On the 5th day since their encounter, Torsten decided he had gathered enough information. He sent a message to Sable through the head cook, requesting her presence in his private study. Not a throne room summons, which would attract attention. A private meeting. She appeared at the appointed hour, escorted by a guard who then withdrew. She stood just inside the doorway, eyes fixed on the floor, hands clasped in front of her. She looked even thinner than she had 5 days ago. He doubted she had eaten more than scraps. Sit, Torsten said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. When she did not move, he added more gently, Please. This is not an interrogation. She sat on the very edge of the chair, perched as if ready to flee at any moment. Her green eyes darted around the room, taking in exits and potential threats before settling back on the floor. Torsten had prepared food. Simple fare that would not intimidate. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, a pitcher of water. He placed it on the table beside her chair. Eat, he said. I am not hungry, Your Majesty. That was not a question about your appetite. Eat. Her hands trembled as she reached for the bread. She took a small piece, barely a mouthful, and ate it with deliberate slowness, as if she had forgotten how to eat proper food, or as if she expected it to be taken away at any moment. More, Torsten ordered. She obeyed, taking larger pieces. He watched her eat half the bread and some cheese before she finally seemed to relax slightly. Color returned to her pale cheeks. Her hands stopped shaking quite so badly. I need you to tell me about your father, Torsten said once she had finished. The fear scent spiked immediately. Your Majesty, I cannot— Yes, you can. And you will. He kept his voice firm, but not harsh. I have already seen your scars. I have already spoken to others in the castle. I know your father has been hurting you for years. What I need to understand is why. Sable's jaw clenched. For a long moment, he thought she would refuse. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. My mother died giving birth to my brother 15 years ago. The baby died too. It was my fault. How was it your fault? You were 9 years old. My father says I tired her out. I was difficult as a child, always asking questions, always wanting to train with the warriors. I exhausted her. When she became pregnant again, she was already weak. Sable's fingers twisted in her lap. My father loved her very much. After she died, he said he would make me strong where she was weak, disciplined where I was wild. He started hitting you then? At 9 years old? Not hitting. Training. To make me better. To make me worthy of my mother's sacrifice. The words came out mechanical, rehearsed. How many times had she been told this? Until she believed it. But I kept failing. I was never good enough. Never disciplined enough. And then came my maturity ceremony. She stopped, her breathing becoming shallow. Tell me about the ceremony, Torsten prompted. I was 16. All my training should have prepared me for my first transformation. But the night before, my father gave me tea. He said it would calm my nerves. I drank it. Her voice cracked. When the ceremony began, I could not shift. I tried, but it was like something was blocking me. The pain was terrible, but nothing happened. Partial change only. Claws and teeth, but no true form. The pack watched me fail. They watched me scream and writhe on the ground, unable to complete what every other shifter does naturally. Your father gave you something that blocked the transformation. She looked up at him sharply, genuine surprise crossing her face. How did you— I read the records, and I have seen enough sabotage to recognize it. Torsten leaned forward. He drugged you deliberately, Sable. He made you fail on purpose. No, but there was doubt in her voice now. He would not. Why would he do that? To give himself an excuse. A failed transformation meant you needed private discipline. It meant he could isolate you, control you, hurt you, all under the guise of correction. And no one would question Beta Ulrich's methods for dealing with his defective daughter. The words were harsh, but they needed to be said. She needed to hear the truth. Sable stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. I should return to my duties. Sit down. Your Majesty. Sit. Down. This time it was an alpha command, layered with power that made her wolf respond instinctively. She sat, but her whole body vibrated with tension. I am going to investigate this formally, Torsten said. I am going to bring your father before the council and present evidence of what he has done. And I am going to make sure he never touches you again. You cannot. Panic filled her voice. You do not understand what he is capable of. He is Beta. He has authority, respect, allies. They will never believe me over him. And when they do not, when you cannot prove anything, he will take me home and he will— She cut herself off, chest heaving. He will not take you anywhere. You are under my protection now. Protection. She laughed, a broken sound. For how long? A week? A month? Eventually, this will fade from your attention. You will have other matters to attend to. And I will still be his daughter, his property, his shame to correct as he sees fit. The resignation in her voice was worse than the fear. She truly believed nothing could change. Torsten rose and moved closer, crouching so their eyes were level. She tensed but did not flee. Listen to me carefully. I am Alpha King. What I say becomes law, and I am telling you that you are under my personal protection. You will not return to that house. You will not be alone with your father. You will not be hurt again. Do you understand? Why? The question was barely audible. Why do you care? I am no one. I am the broken daughter of your beta. I have no value to anyone. You are a member of my pack. That gives you value. That gives you protection. He held her gaze. And what was done to you was wrong. It was evil, and I will not allow it to continue. Tears gathered in her green eyes but did not fall. You cannot promise that. Watch me. For the first time since he had met her, something other than fear crossed her face. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of belief. It was fragile, easily shattered, but it was there. I need you to trust me, Torsten said quietly. Just for a little while. Can you do that? After a long moment, Sable nodded. It was a small movement, hesitant and uncertain. But it was agreement. Good. Then we begin tomorrow. I will convene the council. And this time, the truth will be heard. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. The council chamber felt colder than usual when Torsten entered the following morning. 7 members sat around the heavy oak table, their faces showing varying degrees of curiosity and concern at being summoned with such urgency. Beta Ulrich sat in his customary seat to the right of where Torsten would stand, his expression calm and unreadable. Torsten took his position at the head of the table, feeling the weight of the leather and fur mantle across his shoulders. His beard was freshly trimmed, his bearing that of absolute authority. This would be no casual discussion. This was judgment. I have called you here to address a matter of grave concern, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the stone chamber. A matter that touches on the very foundation of our laws regarding protection of pack members. The council members exchanged glances. Ulrich remained perfectly still, though something flickered in his eyes. Wariness, perhaps. 3 nights ago, I discovered evidence of systematic abuse against a member of this pack. Abuse that has continued for years, hidden from view, ignored by those who witnessed it. Torsten let the words settle. The victim is Sable, daughter of Beta Ulrich. The reaction was immediate. Gasps from some, shocked silence from others. Ulrich's face remained stone, but his hands gripped the armrests of his chair with whitening knuckles. That is a serious accusation, Your Majesty, said Councillor Brennus, an older wolf with silver threading his dark hair. What evidence supports such a claim? I have seen the evidence myself. Scars covering her back, arms, wrists, burns, welts both fresh and old, injuries consistent with prolonged, deliberate violence. Torsten pulled out the records he had found. 8 years ago, Sable underwent her maturity ceremony. The transformation was incomplete. Beta Ulrich requested permission to provide private discipline at home. My father granted that request. Since then, Sable has been isolated, working as a servant in our kitchens, while her father has used that failed ceremony as justification for years of brutality. She is clumsy, Ulrich said, his voice steady. Always has been. Falls frequently. I have tried to teach her grace, but she resists instruction. The marks on her back are from a military training lash. The pattern is unmistakable. Torsten's voice hardened. Do not insult this council's intelligence by claiming otherwise. Perhaps she requires strict discipline, offered Councillor Hakan, though he looked uncomfortable saying it. Some young wolves are more difficult than others. She is 24 years old, Torsten said. She has been receiving this discipline since she was 9, when her mother died. At what point does discipline become torture? Ulrich finally moved, rising from his chair with deliberate slowness. My daughter is weak. She has always been weak. Her mother spoiled her, made her soft. When my mate died bringing a son into the world, a son who did not survive, I was left with a daughter who had none of the strength her mother possessed. It became my duty to forge that strength, to make her worthy of the bloodline she carries. By beating her? Torsten asked quietly. By starving her? By teaching her that her only value lies in how well she can endure pain? I did what was necessary to prevent her from becoming a burden on this pack. Ulrich's composure began to crack. heat entering his voice. And I was proven correct. At her maturity ceremony, she could not complete a basic transformation. She writhed on the ground in front of the entire pack, humiliating herself in our family name. That failure proved she needed stronger measures. Tell me about the tea you gave her the night before the ceremony. Ulrich froze. It was only for a heartbeat, but everyone in the chamber saw it. What tea? He said carefully. The tea you gave her to calm her nerves. Her words. Torsten moved around the table, closing the distance between them. What was in that tea, Ulrich? Chamomile. Lavender. Herbs to help her sleep. I wonder what the royal healer would say if we asked her to examine your daughter. If we asked her to look for traces of blocking agents in her system. The kind of herbs that suppress the transformation. Torsten stopped directly in front of his beta. I wonder what she would find. The chamber went absolutely silent. Even the crackling fire seemed to quiet. You are suggesting, Ulrich said slowly, that I sabotaged my own daughter's ceremony? That is madness, is it? You wanted an excuse. A public failure that would justify taking her home, isolating her, controlling her completely. What better way than to ensure she could not transform? I would never. Ulrich's face flushed with anger. She failed because she is defective, because she is weak. I took measures beforehand to protect the pack from witnessing worse. I gave her suppressants to ensure that if she could not complete the transformation, at least she would not fully lose control and harm someone. I was protecting others from her inadequacy. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Torsten felt his wolf surge forward, barely restrained. You admit it then. You drugged her deliberately. You ensured she would fail so you could justify what came after. Ulrich seemed to realize what he had said. He looked around the table, seeing the horror on the faces of his fellow council members. I acted in the interest of the pack. A defective Omega is a danger. I contained that danger. That is my right as Beta and as her father. Your right? Torsten's voice dropped to a deadly calm. You have no right to torture a member of this pack. Omega or not, she is under pack protection. She has been since birth. And you violated that protection for 8 years, while I and my father failed to see it. Brennus cleared his throat. Your Majesty, if I may, I witnessed the ceremony 8 years ago. I remember thinking at the time that the girl seemed unusually disoriented, but I attributed it to nerves. He looked at Ulrich with something approaching disgust. If what you say is true, Beta Ulrich, if you deliberately caused her failure, that is a violation of pack law. Sabotaging a maturity ceremony is grounds for removal of rank. I did what needed to be done, Ulrich insisted, but his voice had lost its steadiness. She dishonored our bloodline by existing. Her birth killed my mate and my son. Every day she drew breath was an insult to their memory. I tried to make her strong enough to deserve survival. I tried to forge her into something useful, but she remained weak, defiant, ungrateful for the attention I gave her. Attention. Torsten repeated the word as if tasting poison. You call years of beatings attention? I call it necessary correction for an Omega who could not even manage a basic transformation. Because you prevented it. The shout echoed off the stone walls. Torsten's wolf was so close now, his eyes flashing amber. You destroyed her ability, and then punished her for the destruction. You blamed a child for her mother's death and spent 15 years making her pay for the crime of surviving. Another council member spoke up. Aldwin, who rarely contributed but whose opinion carried weight. I must confess something. 3 years ago, I saw the girl in the market. She was carrying supplies for the kitchens. Her sleeve had slipped, and I saw burn marks on her arms. When I asked about it, she claimed an accident with hot oil. I suspected otherwise, but Ulrich was Beta. His authority over his household was absolute. I told myself it was not my place to interfere. I too saw signs, admitted Hakan quietly. She flinched whenever men came near her. I thought perhaps she was simply timid by nature. You all saw, Torsten said, looking at each of them in turn. You all suspected. And you all chose to do nothing because it was easier than confronting a man in power. Uncomfortable silence met his accusation. They could not deny it. I will not make that mistake. Torsten turned back to Ulrich. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position as Beta. You are stripped of all advisory roles and council privileges. You will be confined to the castle prison while a formal sentence is determined. You cannot do this. Ulrich's composure finally shattered. I have served this pack for 30 years. I served your father loyally through wars and famine. I have bled for our people. And you would cast me aside for disciplining my own daughter? You tortured her. I tried to make her strong. You broke her. Torsten's voice cracked like a whip. You took a child and you systematically destroyed her until she believed she deserved the pain, until she believed she was worthless, until she could not even eat a meal without permission. She is worthless. Ulrich spat. She killed my mate. She dishonored our name. Every day I looked at her and saw my failure to produce a worthy heir. I did what any father would do when faced with such disappointment. No, Torsten's voice went deadly quiet. Any father would have loved her, would have helped her grow, would have protected her. You are no father. You are a coward who beat a child because you could not face your own grief. Ulrich lunged forward, rage overtaking reason. Guards appeared from the doorway instantly, seizing him before he could reach the Alpha King. He struggled against their grip, his face contorted with fury. You have grown weak, Ulrich snarled as they dragged him back. Ever since Astrid died, you have been weak. You let emotion cloud your judgment. You see a pretty face with sad eyes, and you forget your duty to the pack. She has bewitched you somehow, turned you against your own people. This is not about justice. This is about you trying to fill the hole your dead mate left behind. The words struck deep, but Torsten did not flinch. Take him to the cells. Post guards, no visitors. As the guards hauled Ulrich toward the door, the former Beta turned back one last time. This is not over. You will regret choosing her over me. The pack will never accept a broken Omega as anything more than what she is. And when you finally see that truth, when you realize your mistake, it will be too late. The damage will be done. The door slammed shut behind him, cutting off whatever else he might have said. Torsten stood in the sudden silence, feeling the eyes of the council on him. Does anyone else wish to voice objections to my decision? No one spoke. Good. Then we are adjourned. He left the chamber without waiting for formal dismissal, his mind already racing ahead. Ulrich was contained, but Sable did not know that yet. She would have heard that the council was convened, would be waiting in terror for the outcome. He found her exactly where he expected to, in the kitchens, scrubbing the same pot over and over with mechanical precision. Her hands were raw from the hot water and harsh soap. She did not look up when he entered, but her shoulders tensed. Come with me, Torsten said gently. She set down the pot and followed without question, without looking at anyone else in the kitchen. They walked through corridors until they reached a section of the castle she had likely never entered, the residential wing where higher-ranking pack members lived. These will be your quarters, he said, opening a door to a modest but comfortable room. You have a lock on the inside. 2 guards will be posted in the hallway at all times. No one enters without your permission. Sable stood in the doorway, staring at the room as if it were a trap. What happened at the council? Your father confessed. He admitted to sabotaging your transformation ceremony. He is being held in the cells pending formal sentencing. Her legs seemed to give out. She caught herself against the door frame, breathing hard. He will kill me. When he gets out, he will kill me. He will not get out. Not for a very long time. Torsten moved closer but maintained distance. You are safe now. Why? The question came out broken. Why are you doing this? I am nothing. My father is right. I am worthless, broken, a shame to our bloodline. Why would you risk his anger? Risk the council's disapproval? Risk political complications for someone like me? Torsten had asked himself the same question throughout the sleepless nights. He still did not have a complete answer. But he had part of one. Because you are my responsibility, he said quietly. Because I failed you. And I will not fail you again. Because what happened to you was wrong. And I have the power to make it right. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And he saw the desperate hope warring with years of learned helplessness in those green eyes. I do not know how to be safe, she whispered. Then I will teach you. Chapter 4. Healing Wounds. The room felt too large. Sable sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, staring at walls that held no memories of pain. Clean linens, a window with actual glass, a hearth with wood already stacked beside it. Luxury beyond anything she had known in 8 years. She did not sleep that first night. Every creak of settling wood made her jump. Every footstep in the corridor sent her heart racing. The lock on the inside of the door felt like a lie. Locks could be broken. Doors could be forced. Safety was an illusion that would shatter the moment she let herself believe in it. Dawn came eventually. With it came a knock at her door, gentle but firm. Sable? A woman's voice, aged and kind. I am Marin, the castle healer. The Alpha King has asked me to examine you, if you will allow it. Sable opened the door slowly. The woman standing there had white hair braided in the traditional style. Deep lines around eyes that held both wisdom and warmth. She looked familiar, though Sable could not place why. I knew your mother, Marin said softly, as if reading her thoughts. You have her eyes. May I come in? Something about the mention of her mother made Sable step aside. Marin entered, carrying a worn leather bag that smelled of herbs and healing salves. I will need to see the injuries, Marin said, setting her bag on the table. I promise to be gentle, and you may tell me to stop at any time. No one had ever asked Sable's permission for anything before. The novelty of it made her throat tight. She removed her dress with trembling hands, standing in only her thin undergarments. Marin's sharp intake of breath was the only sound for several long moments. Sweet ancestors, the healer whispered. She moved closer, professional detachment warring with obvious horror. Child, how long has this been happening? 15 years. Sable's voice came out hollow. Since my mother died. Marin's hands were gentle as she examined each scar, each burn, each place where skin had healed wrong from lack of proper treatment. She said nothing, but Sable saw tears gathering in the old woman's eyes. The Alpha King wants to know about the transformation blocking, Sable said quietly. Can you tell? Let me check. Marin pulled out several small vials from her bag, mixing herbs with practiced efficiency. Drink this. It will make any foreign substances in your blood glow under moonlight. Sable drank the bitter mixture. Marin led her to the window where morning sun was just beginning to brighten the sky. She held Sable's wrist up to the light, examining the veins carefully. There, Marin breathed. Do you see that faint gray tinge? That is wolfsbane residue. Not the killing kind, but the suppressing kind. In your system for years, I would guess. Enough to damage your connection to your wolf without killing you outright. My father gave me tea, Sable heard herself saying. Almost every night. He said it would help me sleep, help me think clearly. It was poisoning you. Marin's voice shook with anger. Slowly, carefully, keeping you weak and disconnected from your wolf. I suspect he increased the dose before your maturity ceremony to ensure complete suppression. Can it be fixed? Yes, but it will take time. Months of treatment to purge the toxins and rebuild your connection. Teas, purification rituals, meditation to reconnect with your inner wolf. Marin squeezed her hand gently. It will not be easy, but you are stronger than you know. Sable wanted to laugh at that. Strong. She had spent 15 years being broken and had never once fought back. As if sensing her thoughts, Marin added, Survival is its own kind of strength. You endured what would have killed weaker souls. Now we teach you to thrive. Over the following days, Marin came every morning and evening. She brought salves for the scars, teas for the poison, and something Sable had forgotten existed, gentle conversation. Marin spoke of her own daughter, long since moved to a southern pack. She spoke of the weather, of castle gossip, of nothing and everything. She treated Sable like a person, not a problem to be corrected. The physical wounds began to heal. The emotional ones would take longer. Torsten visited every afternoon, always at the same time, always knocking first. At first, Sable could barely look at him. He was Alpha King. He had saved her, protected her, destroyed his own beta for her sake. The debt felt crushing. "You do not owe me anything," he said one afternoon, as if reading her mind again. They sat in her room, a careful distance between them. "This is not a transaction." "Then why?" she asked. The question that had haunted her since that first night. Why risk so much for someone like me? Torsten was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago I lost someone. My Luna, Astrid. We were patrolling the northern borders when we were ambushed by a rival pack. I was separated from her during the fighting. By the time I found her, he stopped, jaw clenching. I was too late. I have carried that failure with me every day since. "I am sorry," Sable whispered. "I tell you this because I understand guilt. I understand carrying weight that does not belong to you. Your mother's death was not your fault, Sable. Your father's cruelty was not your fault, and you do not deserve to punish yourself for surviving." The words cracked something inside her. Tears came before she could stop them, silent and overwhelming. Torsten did not try to touch her, did not offer empty comfort. He simply sat with her while she cried for the first time in years. After that, their conversations came easier. He told her about the burden of leadership, about the loneliness of sitting in council chambers making decisions that affected thousands of lives. She told him about the isolation of the kitchens, about making herself invisible, about the strange comfort that came from knowing exactly what each day would bring, even if that certainty involved pain. "You liked the predictability," Torsten said, understanding in his voice. "At least I knew what to expect. Now everything is uncertain. I do not know how to exist without rules telling me when to work, when to eat, when to sleep, when to hurt." She looked at her hands. "Is that pathetic?" "No. It is honest." 3 weeks passed. Then a month. The teas Marin prepared gradually shifted in composition as the wolfsbane purged from Sable's system. The scars on her back faded from angry red to pale pink. She started eating regular meals without prompting. Small victories that felt monumental. One afternoon, Torsten arrived with a proposal. "I want to start training you," he said. "Basic defense. How to protect yourself if you are ever in danger again." Sable's immediate response was fear. "I cannot fight. Everyone can fight. You have simply never been taught how." He stood, offering his hand. "Come. Just simple movements today. I promise not to push too hard." She took his hand, surprised by the warmth of it. He led her to a private training yard behind the castle, away from curious eyes. It was empty, except for practice weapons and training dummies. "Show me your stance," Torsten said. Sable had no idea what that meant. She stood there awkwardly, arms at her sides. "Like this." He moved behind her, gently adjusting her posture. His hands on her shoulders were careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent. Center your weight. They spent an hour on just that. Standing properly, moving without telegraphing intention, breathing through discomfort. It was exhausting in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Every instinct screamed at her to make herself smaller, to hide, to submit. Learning to take up space felt like rebellion. "Better," Torsten said as the sun began to set. "Tomorrow we will work on blocks. Tomorrow." The promise of it felt dangerous and thrilling at once. That night, Sable dreamed of running through forests, not in fear, but in freedom. She woke gasping, the phantom sensation of wind in her fur still vivid. Her wolf, distant and weak, but there, still there. The next morning, Marin examined her with obvious satisfaction. "The connection is rebuilding. Slowly, but steadily. In another month or 2, we might attempt a partial transformation, just to test your control." Hope was a fragile thing. Sable held it carefully, afraid to squeeze too tight. 2 months after the council meeting, formal judgment was passed on Ulrich. Sable was not required to attend, but Torsten offered her the choice. "He cannot hurt you anymore," Torsten said. "But if you want to see him face consequences, you have that right." She went. Not because she wanted to, but because some part of her needed to see it end. The council chamber was full. Ulrich stood in the center, hands bound, flanked by guards. He looked older than she remembered, smaller somehow, When his eyes found hers in the crowd, she saw hatred so pure it felt like a physical blow. "Beta Ulrich." Torsten's voice rang with absolute authority. "You have been found guilty of systematic abuse, of sabotaging a sacred ceremony, of violating pack law and basic decency. The council has voted. You are hereby stripped of all rank and titles. You are exiled from these lands for 5 years. You will be escorted to the eastern mountains at dawn and left there. If you return before your sentence is complete, you will be executed. Do you understand? I understand that you are a fool," Ulrich said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "That girl has bewitched you. She has always been manipulative, always playing the victim, and you have fallen for it completely. When you realize your mistake, when she shows her true nature, remember that I warned you." "Take him away," Torsten ordered. As the guards moved forward, Ulrich turned to look at Sable one last time. "You destroyed everything. Your mother, your brother, my honor, my position. I hope you are satisfied with the ruin you have wrought. You are a curse on our bloodline, and you will always be broken." The words struck deep, but Sable did not look away. She met her father's gaze and held it until he was forcibly turned around and marched from the chamber. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together tightly, willing them to be still. Torsten appeared beside her, not touching but present, a wall between her and the lingering poison of those final words. "He is wrong," Torsten said quietly. About all of it. Sable wanted to believe him. She was trying to learn how. That evening, she returned to her quarters to find Marin waiting with a small package. "What is this?" Sable asked. "Open it." Inside was a training tunic and leather breeches, sized for her. Simple but well made. Clothing meant for movement, for strength, for someone who intended to fight. "The Alpha King commissioned them," Marin said with a smile. "He said you would need proper attire for training. That kitchen dresses were not appropriate for a warrior." A warrior. The word felt absurd and wonderful at once. Sable held the clothing against her chest, feeling something warm and unfamiliar bloom beneath her ribs. Not happiness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Chapter 5. Growing connection. In the weeks that followed Ulrich's exile, the castle's rhythm shifted in small but undeniable ways. What had once been a backdrop for Sable's survival slowly began to resemble a place where a future might exist. 3 months passed since Ulrich's exile, and the castle transformed from a place of silent suffering into something resembling sanctuary. Sable woke each morning without the immediate terror that had once defined her existence. The lock on her door remained unused most nights now, though its presence still comforted her. Marin's treatments showed undeniable progress. The wolfsbane had been systematically purged from Sable's system through carefully measured teas and purification rituals that left her exhausted but cleaner somehow, as if poison had seeped from her very bones. The scars on her back faded from angry red to pale silver, still present but no longer screaming their history to anyone who looked. "You are healing remarkably well," Marin said one morning as she examined Sable's arms. "The connection to your wolf is strengthening. I can feel it when I check your pulse. The rhythm is changing, becoming more synchronized with your inner nature. When can I try to shift?" Sable asked, the question both eager and terrified. "Soon. Another few weeks to be certain. Rushing it could damage the bond permanently." Marin squeezed her hand gently. "Patience, child. You have already come so far." Torsten had become a constant presence in her new life, arriving each afternoon at the same hour with the reliability of sunrise. They no longer met in her quarters, where everything felt weighted with formality. Instead, they walked the castle grounds, spoke in the library, or sat in the gardens when weather permitted. Their conversations had evolved beyond trauma and recovery into something more substantial. Torsten spoke of the burdens of leadership, the impossible choices that kept him awake at night, the weight of knowing that every decision affected hundreds of lives. Sable listened and found herself offering perspectives he had not considered, seeing problems from angles his advisors missed. "You would make a good counselor," he said one afternoon as they walked along the eastern wall. "You see connections others overlook." "I spent years watching people," Sable replied, When you are invisible, you notice things. The cook favors her left side because her hip pains her. The head guard drinks more when his son writes from the southern territories. The younger servants gossip about which warriors are gentle and which are cruel. Small details that reveal larger truths. Torsten studied her with an expression she could not quite read. I have been thinking. When you are ready, I would like to begin training you properly. Not just recovery, but actual combat skills. Why? The question came automatically. Defensive. Because you should know how to protect yourself. Because strength is not just physical, but mental. Because I think you would excel at it. He paused. And because I want you to never feel helpless again. Something warm and dangerous bloomed in Sable's chest at those words. She pushed it down carefully. Gratitude was not the same as affection. Protection was not the same as care. She needed to remember that. But when Torsten looked at her with those gray eyes that held both sadness and determination, remembering became difficult. Training began the following week in a private section of the practice yards where they would not be observed by curious warriors. Torsten started with basics, stance and movement, how to read an opponent's intentions through body language. You already know this instinctively, he told her during their first session. You have been reading threats your entire life. We are simply giving you tools to respond. He was right. Sable discovered that years of anticipating her father's moods had taught her to recognize aggression in its earliest stages. When Torsten moved to strike during a drill, she knew his intention before his arm fully extended. Her body responded with blocks she had not consciously learned, muscle memory built from survival. Good, Torsten said after she successfully deflected a series of attacks. You are faster than you think. They trained for an hour each morning before the castle fully woke. Sable found herself looking forward to those sessions with an anticipation that felt dangerous. It was not just the training, though she genuinely enjoyed learning to fight. It was Torsten himself, the careful way he corrected her form, the pride in his voice when she mastered a new technique, the occasional brush of his hand against hers that sent electricity through her skin. She was developing feelings for him. The realization arrived one morning as she watched him demonstrate a complicated maneuver, his movements fluid and controlled. This was not gratitude or simple attraction. This was deeper, more complicated, terrifying in its intensity. Sable tried to suppress it. He was Alpha King. She was the broken daughter of a disgraced beta. Whatever kindness he showed her came from duty, and perhaps pity, nothing more. But then she would catch him watching her with an expression that suggested his thoughts had strayed somewhere improper, and hope would flare treacherously in her chest. One morning, during an intense sparring session, Sable felt something shift inside her. Power surged through her limbs, stronger than anything she had experienced. Her vision sharpened. Sense exploded in intensity. When she looked down at her hands, golden claws had emerged, sharp and deadly. Torsten stopped mid-movement, his eyes widening. Sable, look at yourself. She stared at her transformed hands, at the fur rippling along her forearms, at the strength evident in muscles that had not existed weeks ago. It was only partial transformation, not the full wolf form she craved, but it was real. Undeniable proof that her wolf still lived. The emotion overwhelmed her. Joy and relief and disbelief crashed together. Without thinking, she threw herself at Torsten, wrapping her arms around him in an embrace fueled by pure gratitude and triumph. He caught her easily, his arms coming up to steady her. For a moment they stood like that, her face pressed against his chest, his heart beating steadily beneath her ear. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. Then awareness returned. Sable pulled back, horrified at her own boldness. I am sorry. I should not have. Do not apologize. Torsten's voice was rough. His hands remained on her shoulders, thumb tracing the edge of her collarbone through the fabric of her training tunic. You have nothing to be sorry for. The air between them felt charged, heavy with words neither dared speak. Sable's transformed hands slowly returned to normal as her wolf settled. Satisfied with having made its presence known, Torsten released her and stepped back, though reluctance showed in every line of his body. We should stop for today. That was significant progress. You need rest. But as Sable walked back to her quarters, She felt anything but tired. Energy hummed through her veins, equal parts wolf power and the lingering sensation of Torsten's arms around her. Maren confirmed later that afternoon that the partial transformation was excellent progress. In another month, perhaps 2, you will be ready to attempt full shift. The bond is rebuilding beautifully. That evening, Torsten did not come for their usual walk. Sable tried not to feel disappointed, tried not to analyze what the embrace might have meant. She was being foolish. He was probably occupied with important matters of state, not avoiding her because of one impulsive hug. But he did not come the next evening either, or the one after that. On the 4th day, ambassadors arrived at the castle, their banners marking them as representatives from the southern territories. Sable heard about it from kitchen gossip, how they brought proposals and gifts, how they had been received with full ceremony in the great hall. She should not have felt jealous when she learned one of the ambassadors was Alpha Halvard's daughter, the beautiful and accomplished Ingrid. She should not have cared when servants whispered about marriage alliances and strategic benefits, but she did care. Desperately. Painfully. With an intensity that revealed just how deeply her feelings for Torsten had grown. The ambassadors stayed for 3 days. During that time, Sable saw Torsten only once, passing in a corridor surrounded by advisors and guests. He met her eyes briefly, something conflicted in his expression, before being pulled away by council business. On the evening of the 3rd day, Maren found Sable in the library, pretending to read. "He is not interested in her," the healer said without preamble. "I do not know what you mean. Child, I may be old, but I am not blind. The southern girl is beautiful and accomplished, and would make an excellent political alliance. The council is pushing hard for the match." Maren sat beside her. "But Torsten barely looks at her. He looks for you instead. Even when you are not in the room, he looks. That does not mean anything. It means everything. But he is afraid." "Of what?" "Of taking advantage of you. Of confusing gratitude with genuine feeling. Of rushing you into something before you are ready." Maren's voice was gentle. "He cares for you deeply, Sable. But he does not want to pressure you. So he holds back, probably suffering terribly while doing so." The words settled over Sable, warm and terrifying. "I do not know what to do. You do nothing until you are certain of your own heart. And when you are certain, you be honest. Life is too short for games, especially for those who have already lost so much time to suffering." The ambassadors departed the next morning. By afternoon, word spread that the Alpha King had politely declined the marriage proposal, offering instead a treaty of mutual trade and defense. The council, apparently, was not pleased. That evening, Torsten finally appeared at Sable's door. He looked exhausted, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "Walk with me?" he asked. They walked in silence through corridors and out into the gardens where spring flowers had begun to bloom. The air smelled of rain and new growth. "I owe you an explanation," Torsten said finally, "for avoiding you these past days. You do not owe me anything. I do, though. You deserve honesty." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "When you embraced me after your transformation, I wanted nothing more than to hold you and not let go. That terrified me. You have been through unimaginable trauma. The last thing you need is pressure from me, from someone in a position of power over you. You have never pressured me," Sable said quietly. "But I want to. That is the problem. I want to court you properly, to see if what I feel is real and lasting. But I am afraid of my own intentions, afraid that I am taking advantage of your vulnerability, afraid that you feel obligated because I protected you." Sable's heart hammered in her chest. "What do you feel?" "Something I have not felt since Astrid died. Something that grows stronger every day. When I am in council meetings, I think about what you would advise. When I train, I wish you were there. When I sleep, I dream of—" He stopped himself. "It does not matter what I feel if you are not ready, if you do not feel the same." The vulnerability in his voice undid something in Sable. This was not the Alpha King speaking. This was simply Torsten, a man who had lost love and found it again in the most unexpected place. "I thought I was alone in this," she whispered. "I thought you saw me as a responsibility, Something broken you needed to fix. You were never broken. Hurt, yes. Treated abominably, absolutely, but never broken. He took a careful step closer. Sable, I am asking your permission to court you properly. Not as king to subject, but as one person to another. If you need time, I will wait. If you do not want this at all, I will accept that, and never mention it again. Sable looked at him. At this man who had saved her life, and then taught her to save herself, who had been patient when she expected violence, who looked at her as if she mattered. The answer came easily. Yes, she said. I want that. The smile that broke across Torsten's face was worth every moment of uncertainty. He reached for her hand, and this time when their fingers interlaced, it felt like a beginning, rather than an ending. Chapter 6. Blood and Resolve. The message arrived on a gray morning 2 weeks after Torsten and Sable had begun their courtship. A messenger from the Northern Territories, mud-splattered and exhausted, delivered it directly to the Alpha King during breakfast in the Great Hall. Torsten read it once, his expression darkening with each line. Then he read it again, jaw clenching. What is it? Sable asked quietly. She sat beside him now at meals, a position that had caused some raised eyebrows among the council, but no outright objections. Trouble. The kind I have been expecting for 3 years. He handed her the parchment. The message was brief and brutal. Alpha Ragnar of the Northern Pack demanded the fertile hunting territories along the border, lands that had belonged to Torsten's pack for generations. If the demand was not met within 2 weeks, Ragnar would consider it an act of hostility and respond accordingly. War, in everything but name. This is the pack that killed Astrid, Torsten said, his voice low enough that only Sable could hear. They have been testing our borders for years, waiting for a moment of weakness. They think now is that moment. Because of me, Sable realized. Because you removed your beta, and the council is divided. They see instability. They see opportunity. Torsten stood, addressing the hall. Council, war room, now. The next hours blurred into strategic planning. Maps were spread across tables, marking patrol routes and defensive positions. Messengers were dispatched to allied packs requesting support. Warriors were called from outlying territories to reinforce the castle garrison. Sable watched from the edge of the room, technically present, but not participating. She listened as Torsten coordinated defense with the precision of someone who had fought and won battles before. The council deferred to his military judgment, even as they questioned his personal decisions. We should accept Ragnar's terms, Councillor Håkon suggested. The hunting grounds are rich, yes, but not worth pack lives. If we give him those lands, he will demand more next season, Torsten replied. Appeasement does not work with wolves like Ragnar. He respects only strength. Then we fight, said Brennus. But our forces are spread thin. We need every capable warrior. That evening, as Torsten prepared patrol strategies, Sable found him in his private study. Maps covered every surface, marked with positions and movements. I want to help, she said without preamble. Torsten looked up, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. You are helping. Your presence here steadies me. That is not what I mean. I want to fight. I have been training. I can defend myself now. No. The word was absolute. Absolutely not. Why? Because I am not strong enough? Because I might fail? Because I cannot lose you. The admission came out raw. Torsten set down the map he had been studying. I have already lost one person I cared about to Ragnar's pack. I will not risk you the same way. You do not have the right to make that choice for me. Sable's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. I am not a fragile thing to be protected anymore. You have spent months teaching me to be strong. Let me be strong. Being strong does not mean throwing yourself into danger unnecessarily. And being cautious does not mean hiding from every threat. She moved closer. Torsten, I have spent my entire life being told what I cannot do, what I am not capable of. Please do not become another voice in that chorus. He stared at her, conflict written across his features. If something happened to you, then it would be my choice, my risk. You cannot protect me from everything, and trying to do so only makes me a prisoner again. A comfortable one, perhaps, but still caged. The argument went unresolved that night, but Sable saw the impact her words had. Torsten did not forbid her involvement again, though worry shadowed his every glance. 3 days later, scouts reported movement along the northern border. Not a full assault yet, but testing parties, probing for weaknesses. Torsten ordered increased patrols and moved warriors into position. Sable continued her training with renewed intensity. Maren had declared her ready to attempt full transformation, and they scheduled it for the following evening. But Sable felt the shift building inside her even without ritual preparation. Her wolf paced restlessly, sensing the approaching conflict, eager to prove itself. The attack came suddenly, violently, and not where anyone expected. Torsten had been conducting a nighttime patrol of the eastern perimeter, accompanied by 6 warriors. Standard procedure, following routes that had been safe for months. But Ragnar's forces had been watching, learning, waiting for exactly this kind of predictable movement. The ambush struck a mile from the castle, 5 warriors against Torsten's 7. They came from the forest in coordinated silence, aiming to kill or capture the Alpha King before reinforcements could arrive. Sable had been restless that night, pacing her quarters when she should have been sleeping. Something felt wrong, a prickling unease she could not name. When distant sounds of combat reached the castle, faint but unmistakable, she was already moving. She ran through corridors, ignoring startled servants, grabbing a guard's sword as she passed. The eastern gate stood open, warriors pouring out toward the sound of fighting. Sable followed, her heart hammering, her wolf surging forward with sudden clarity. She should not have followed. She had promised to stay safe. But the thought of Torsten facing Ragnar's warriors while she cowered behind stone walls was unbearable. The forest was dark, lit only by scattered moonlight through heavy clouds. Sable followed the sounds of snarling and the metallic scent of blood. Her eyesight sharpened impossibly. Her hearing caught nuances she had never noticed before. Her wolf was rising, responding to danger and desperation. She found them in a clearing torn apart by combat. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, and some terribly still. Torsten fought in full wolf form, massive and dark-furred, his gray eyes burning with fury. He had already killed 2 attackers, but 3 more circled him, coordinating their strikes with practiced precision. One lunged. Torsten twisted, catching the wolf by the throat and throwing it aside, but the maneuver left him exposed. Another attacker dove for his flank, jaws aimed at the vulnerable space between ribs. Sable did not think. She ran forward, sword raised, and drove the blade into the attacking wolf's shoulder. It howled and turned on her, rage and pain making it sloppy. She dodged its strike, using techniques Torsten had drilled into her during countless training sessions. Power exploded through her body. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles tearing and rebuilding. The sword fell from hands that were no longer hands. Her vision went gold, her senses overwhelming in their intensity. She shifted. Fully, completely, for the first time in her life. The wolf that emerged was smaller than the males surrounding her, but fast and dark-furred with distinctive silver markings along her flanks. She felt whole in a way she had never experienced, her human consciousness melding perfectly with her wolf's instincts. The wounded attacker hesitated, surprised by the sudden transformation. Sable used that hesitation. She lunged, going for the throat, her teeth finding purchase. Hot blood filled her mouth. The attacker collapsed. Torsten had frozen mid-strike, staring at her with shock and something that might have been pride. The remaining 2 attackers took advantage of his distraction, one landing a solid bite on his shoulder. The fury that filled Sable was primal and absolute. These wolves had tried to kill Torsten, had succeeded in killing Astrid 3 years ago, had come here tonight planning murder and found resistance instead. She threw herself at the nearest attacker, moving with speed she had not known she possessed. Her smaller size made her harder to catch, her newfound strength surprising opponents who expected weakness. She fought with the desperation of someone who had survived 15 years of brutality and refused to be made a victim again. The fight lasted minutes that felt like hours. When reinforcements finally arrived, drawn by the sounds of battle. They found 4 enemy wolves dead, and 2 fleeing into the forest. Torsten stood over Sable's wolf form protectively, his shoulder bleeding but his stance defiant. "Take the wounded back to the castle," he ordered in human voice, having shifted back. "Double the patrols." This was a targeted attack. Sable tried to shift back, willing her human form to return. It took longer than the initial transformation, her wolf reluctant to retreat after such triumph. But eventually she managed it, collapsing naked and shaking in the torn grass. Someone threw a cloak over her. Torsten knelt beside her, his hands gentle as they checked for injuries. "You should not have followed," he said. But there was no anger in his voice, only wonder and lingering fear. "You could have been killed. So could you." Sable's voice was hoarse. "I told you I wanted to help. Did you think I would stand aside and let you face them alone? You transformed. Fully. In the middle of combat." He brushed dirt from her face. "Do you understand how incredible that is? How much control that requires?" She had not thought about it during the fight, too focused on survival. But now, feeling her wolf settled comfortably inside her, connected and whole, she realized the magnitude of what she had done. "I saved you," she said simply. "You did." Torsten helped her stand, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give out. "And now every warrior here witnessed it. They saw you fight. They saw you win." The implications of that settled slowly. She was no longer the broken girl hidden in the kitchens. She was a warrior who had defended her alpha king in combat. The pack would have to acknowledge her now, whether they wanted to or not. As they walked back toward the castle, surrounded by warriors whose respect showed in their careful distance and averted eyes, Sable felt something shift. Not just in her relationship with Torsten, though the way he kept her close suggested that had deepened as well, but in her understanding of herself. She was not helpless. She was not worthless. She was dangerous when provoked, capable when challenged, and strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical power alone. Ragnar had meant this attack as a display of dominance. Instead, he had given Sable the opportunity to prove herself not just to the pack, but to herself. The night was far from over. Wounds needed tending. Strategies needed adjustment. Responses needed planning. But as Torsten's hand tightened on hers, both of them bloodied and exhausted, but alive, Sable felt something she had never expected to feel again. Victory. Chapter 7. Trials of Fire. The attack changed everything. Within days, word spread through the territories that Sable, daughter of the disgraced Beta Ulrich, had transformed fully during combat and fought alongside the Alpha King against northern invaders. The story grew with each telling, some versions more accurate than others, but all carrying the same essential truth. She was no longer invisible. Torsten wasted no time capitalizing on the shift in perception. 3 days after the ambush, he announced his formal intention to court Sable as a potential Luna. The declaration sent shockwaves through the council and the pack at large. "You cannot be serious," Councillor Hucken said during the emergency session convened immediately afterward. "She has only just learned to transform. She has no training in leadership, no diplomatic experience, no—" "She has courage," Torsten interrupted. "She has survived horrors that would have broken most wolves. She has proven herself in combat, and she has my trust. That should be sufficient. The pack will never accept her," another counselor argued. "Her father was exiled in disgrace. Her bloodline is tainted by his actions. Then the pack will learn to see beyond bloodline and judge her by her own merit." Torsten's voice carried absolute authority. "I am not asking permission. I am informing you of my decision. However, I acknowledge the concerns raised. Therefore, Sable will undergo the traditional trials of privation required for any potential Luna." The chamber fell silent. The trials were ancient tradition, rarely invoked in modern times, because most Lunas came from established families with proven leadership. 3 tests designed to evaluate fitness to lead: wisdom, strength, and heart. The trials have not been conducted in over 50 years. Brennis said carefully. "Are you certain this is necessary?" "I am certain it is fair. Sable will be judged by the same standards as any candidate. If she passes, no one can question her right to stand beside me. Sable learned of the trials later that evening when Torsten found her in the library. She had been researching pack law, trying to understand the position she now found herself occupying. 3 tests, Torsten explained, sitting beside her. The first is wisdom, a trial of judgment and mediation. You will be presented with a genuine dispute and required to resolve it fairly. The second is strength, a physical challenge that proves your capability in combat or crisis. The third is heart, a test of character under pressure. What if I fail? Then we find another way. But Sable, I do not believe you will fail. Everything you have survived has prepared you for this. When did the trials begin? In 3 days. The council is arranging them now. He took her hand. You do not have to do this. I can declare you Luna by right of my authority alone. The pack might resist, but they would eventually accept it. No. Sable's voice was firm. You said I would be judged by the same standards as anyone else. I want to earn this, not have it granted out of pity or political maneuvering. If I am to be Luna, the pack needs to believe I deserve it. Pride shone in Torsten's eyes. Then we prepare. Tomorrow, we begin intensive training for the trials. The following days passed in focused preparation. Maren taught Sable about pack law and historical precedents for mediation. Torsten drilled her on combat techniques and crisis management. Brennus, surprisingly, offered advice on how to read political motivations behind seemingly simple disputes. The wisdom trial will likely involve 2 parties with legitimate grievances, he explained. Your task is not to make everyone happy, which is impossible, but to find a solution that serves the greater good while honoring tradition. The first trial commenced on a cold morning, with the entire council and dozens of pack members assembled in the great hall. Sable stood before them in formal attire, a simple but well-made dress in deep green that brought out her eyes. Torsten sat to the side, officially present as witness, but forbidden from interfering. 2 families were brought forward, both farmers whose lands bordered each other. They had been disputing hunting rights on a section of forest between their properties for 3 years. Previous attempts at mediation had failed, and tensions had escalated to the point of violence between the younger members. State your positions, Sable said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The first farmer, an older man named Gideon, argued that his family had hunted those woods for generations, long before the neighboring family had even arrived in the territory. Tradition granted him the rights. The second farmer, a woman named Petra, countered that the forest was technically unclaimed land, open to anyone who worked hard enough to track game there. Her family needed the meat as much as Gideon's did, and denying them access based solely on who arrived first was unjust. Both had valid arguments. Both had supporters in the assembled crowd. Sable could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She spent an hour questioning both parties, asking about herd sizes, family needs, hunting patterns, and seasonal variations. The council watched with expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. Finally, Sable made her decision. The forest will be shared, she announced, but not randomly. Gideon's family will have exclusive hunting rights during autumn and winter, when game is most plentiful and preservation techniques allow for storage. Petra's family will have exclusive rights during spring and summer, when fresh meat is needed but cannot be stored as easily. Both families will work together to maintain the forest, clearing paths and protecting it from poachers. Any disputes arising from this arrangement will be brought to the council immediately, rather than escalating to violence. Silence followed her pronouncement. Then Brennus nodded slowly. A compromise that honors tradition while acknowledging present need. Neither family gets everything they want, but both benefit. Well reasoned. Gideon looked unhappy, but grudgingly accepted. Petra seemed surprised, but pleased. The council members exchanged glances, some impressed, others still reserving judgment. The first trial is past, Torsten declared. The second trial came 2 days later, designed to test strength and capability under pressure. Sable expected combat or a test of physical prowess. Instead, she was presented with a different kind of crisis. A child had wandered into the forest and become lost. Search parties had been looking for hours without success. As the trial, Sable was required to lead a team to find and retrieve the child before nightfall, when temperatures would drop dangerously. She was given 6 warriors to command, all of whom had more experience than her. Some looked openly skeptical about following orders from someone so recently a kitchen servant. Sable pushed past her intimidation. Form a line, 20 paces between each person. We move east from the child's last known location, sweeping in a grid pattern. Anyone with tracking experience, point out signs. Everyone else, watch for disturbed undergrowth or fabric caught on branches. We move quickly but thoroughly. Understood? They moved out, following her instructions with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Sable used every sense available to her, letting her wolf's instincts guide her through the forest. She noticed details others missed. A small footprint in mud, a broken twig at child height, the faint scent of fear carried on the wind. 2 hours into the search, she found the trail. The child had wandered east, then doubled back north, probably disoriented. She redirected the search party, pushing them hard. They found the girl just before dusk, cold and frightened, but unharmed, huddled beneath a fallen log. Sable approached slowly, speaking gently, her own memories of fear making her careful not to frighten the child further. "You are safe now," she said, wrapping her cloak around the shivering girl. "Let us get you home." The warriors who had doubted her carried new respect in their eyes as they returned to the castle. The child's parents wept with gratitude. The council acknowledged her success. "The second trial is past," Torsten said, his pride evident despite the required neutrality. The third trial was scheduled for the following evening, during the full moon. The trial of heart, the most difficult to quantify and the most subjective in judgment. Sable waited in her quarters as the sun set, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Marin had been unable to tell her what to expect. The trial varied depending on the candidate and the circumstances. When the summons came, it was not to the great hall, but to the courtyard. The council waited there in the moonlight, their expressions grave. Torsten stood with them, but something in his posture screamed alarm. "For your final trial," Brennus announced, "you must face a truth from your past. You must confront your greatest fear and prove that you have conquered it." 2 guards stepped forward. Between them, bound and furious, was Ulrich. Sable's world narrowed to that single figure, her father, who had beaten her for 15 years, who had poisoned her, who had destroyed her childhood and nearly destroyed her future. The man she thought safely exiled far away. He was intercepted attempting to return, Brennus explained. He violated his exile and was captured 3 days ago. "We have been holding him for this purpose. You are using him as part of my trial?" Sable could barely form the words. "Your greatest fear has always been your father. The trial requires you to face him, to show that you have moved beyond the power he held over you." Brennus gestured to the guards. "You will fight him one-on-one. Defeat him, and you pass. Fail, and you are deemed unworthy." "This is barbaric," Torsten growled, taking a step forward. "She should not have to." "It is tradition," another counselor interrupted. "The trial of heart requires facing one's deepest fear. For Sable, that fear has a name and a face." Ulrich's eyes locked on Sable, burning with hatred and something worse. Satisfaction. He had been given one final chance to hurt her, sanctioned by the very council that had exiled him. "Look at you," he said, his voice dripping contempt. "Playing at being strong, playing at being worthy, but I see the truth. You are still that pathetic child who cowered in the corner while I administered correction. You are still weak, still broken, still mine." The words struck like physical blows. Sable felt herself shrinking, old patterns of fear rising automatically. Then she looked at Torsten, saw the faith in his eyes, the absolute certainty that she could do this. She looked at Marin, at the warriors who had fought beside her, at the child she had rescued who watched from her mother's arms. She was not that cowering child anymore. She had survived, had healed, had transformed. She had fought enemies in the forest and won. She had made decisions that affected lives, and made them wisely. "I am not yours," Sable said quietly. "I never was. You do not own me. You do not control me. You are nothing but a bitter man who mistook cruelty for strength and pain for discipline." "Then prove it," Ulrich snarled. "Fight me. Show everyone what you are really made of." The guards released him. He shifted immediately, his wolf form large and scarred from years of battle. He lunged without warning, going straight for her throat. Sable shifted in response, her transformation faster now, smoother. Her smaller wolf form dodged his attack, using speed where he had strength. She remembered every lesson Torsten had taught her, every technique drilled into muscle memory. The fight was brutal, but brief. Ulrich fought with the confidence of someone who had dominated her entire life. But Sable fought with something stronger than confidence: purpose. She was not fighting to kill him. She was fighting to prove she could, fighting to show that his power over her had ended. She got him on the ground, jaws at his throat, one killing bite away from ending him forever. The courtyard held its breath. Sable released him and stepped back, shifting to human form. Someone threw a cloak over her shoulders. "I could kill you," she said, looking down at her father who lay bleeding and defeated. "I have the strength, the skill, and every justification, but I choose not to. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I refuse to let you make me into someone who kills out of vengeance. You taught me cruelty. I choose compassion. You taught me hatred. I choose to be better." She turned to the council. "Exile him permanently, beyond the northern mountains where no pack will shelter him. Let him live with the consequences of his actions, but I will not be his executioner." Silence. Then Brennus stepped forward, his aged face showing something that might have been awe. "The third trial is past. By showing mercy to one who showed you none, you have proven the greatest strength of all, the strength of character." Chapter 8. Crown of Silver and Starlight. The ceremony took place beneath the full moon 3 weeks later, when preparations were complete and the pack had gathered from every corner of the territories. The courtyard had been transformed into something ancient and sacred. Torches burning in a circle around a raised stone platform that had witnessed countless bonding ceremonies over generations. Sable stood in her chambers as the sun set, staring at her reflection in the polished bronze mirror. The dress Maren had commissioned was unlike anything she had ever worn. Deep forest green with silver threading that caught the light. Leather accents at the shoulders and waist in the warrior tradition. Sleeves that left her scarred arms visible rather than hidden. A statement that she was both leader and survivor, both gentle and fierce. "You are ready," Maren said, adjusting the final details. The healer's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Your mother would be so proud of you, child. I wish she could see this. You knew her well? I delivered you into this world 24 years ago. I saw how much she loved you, even in those final moments." Maren squeezed her hand. "She would have fought armies to see you safe. Instead, you fought your own battles and won. That is a different kind of strength, but no less powerful." A knock at the door announced Torsten's arrival. He wore formal leathers and furs, his dark hair braided in the traditional style, his beard trimmed close. But it was his eyes that held Sable's attention, gray and warm, and filled with an emotion that made her breath catch. "The pack waits," he said, offering his hand. "Are you certain? Once we begin the ritual, there is no going back. You will be bound to me, to this pack, to responsibilities that will demand everything you have." "I have never been more certain of anything." She took his hand, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. They walked together through corridors now familiar, past servants who bowed with genuine respect, past guards who offered nods of acknowledgement. The castle that had once represented her cage now felt like home. The courtyard fell silent as they emerged. Hundreds of pack members circled the platform, witnesses to the ancient ritual. The council stood nearest, even the skeptics now showing acceptance, if not warmth. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, eyes wide with wonder. Brennus stepped forward as officiant, his aged voice carrying clearly across the assembly. "We gather tonight under the witness of the moon and stars to bind our Alpha King to his chosen Luna. The trials have been completed and passed. The pack has been consulted. Does anyone present contest this bonding?" Silence answered. Not the hostile silence of rejection, but the accepting quiet of consensus. "Then let us proceed." Brennus gestured for them to approach the platform. The ceremony followed traditions older than the castle itself. Torsten and Sable knelt facing each other, hands clasped between them. A ceremonial blade was presented, silver and ancient, used for this purpose for centuries. Blood calls to blood, Brennus intoned. Pack calls to pack. Two become one under the moon's blessing. The blade cut shallow lines across their palms. They pressed their bleeding hands together, their blood mingling as words of binding were spoken in the old tongue. Sable felt power surge through the connection, her wolf rising to meet Torsten's, recognizing and accepting the bond. Then came the marking. Torsten shifted partially, his canines lengthening. He leaned forward, his breath warm against her throat, and bit down gently over her pulse point, the claiming mark that would identify her as Luna, to every wolf who saw or scented her. Pain flared briefly, then transformed into something else entirely. Heat and connection and belonging. When he pulled back, his eyes had gone amber with his wolf's presence. Sable felt the mark settle into her skin, power thrumming through it. Her turn. She shifted partially, feeling her own canines extend, and marked him in return. His shoulder, just above his heart. She felt his sharp intake of breath, felt the bond solidify between them, unbreakable and absolute. When they separated, both breathing hard, Brennus raised his hands to the assembly. Behold your Alpha King and Luna, bound by blood and moon. Let any who would challenge this bonding speak now, or hold their peace forever. Still silence. But this time, someone began to howl, a long, ululating call of acceptance and celebration. Others joined, the sound building until the entire pack sang their approval into the night sky. Even those who had doubted, even those who had questioned, they all acknowledged the completion of the ritual. Sable's own wolf rose in response, and for the first time, she howled with her pack, not as an outsider or a victim, but as their Luna. The sound felt like freedom given voice. The formal ceremony concluded with the presentation of Luna marks. Marin stepped forward bearing ceremonial paint made from crushed silver leaves and blessed water. She drew traditional symbols across Sable's collarbones and down her arms, covering the old scars with new marks of power and authority. These signify your role as Luna, Marin explained, her voice thick with emotion. Protector of the vulnerable, voice of wisdom, heart of the pack. When the marks were complete, Torsten helped Sable stand. They turned to face the assembly together, his arm around her waist, her hand over his heart. My Luna, he said simply, and the pride in his voice echoed across the courtyard. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn. Food and drink flowed freely, music played, and pack members who had never spoken to Sable before approached with congratulations and offerings. Children brought her flowers. Warriors offered pledges of loyalty. Even the skeptical counselors bent their heads in respect. But amid the celebration, reality intruded. A messenger arrived near midnight with urgent news. Torsten read the dispatch, his expression hardening. What is it? Sable asked quietly. Ragnar. He has withdrawn his forces from our borders and sent a formal request for peace talks. The attack 3 weeks ago failed, and he has apparently decided that continued aggression is not in his interest. Torsten showed her the message. He offers a non-aggression treaty and trade agreements. Because you are strong, Sable realized. Because the pack is unified again. He sees no weakness to exploit. Partially. But also because word reached him about you. About your trials. About the bonding ceremony. About the pack's acceptance. Torsten's smile was grim. He remembers Astrid, how her loss weakened me. He expected the same vulnerability. Instead, he sees a Luna who fought beside her Alpha and earned her position through merit. It changes the calculation. Will you accept the treaty? That is not my decision alone anymore. What do you think, Luna? The title still felt strange, but Sable considered the question seriously. We accept, not because we fear him, but because peace serves the pack better than war. But we remain vigilant. Trust must be earned, not granted freely. Wise counsel. Torsten kissed her forehead. We will present it to the council tomorrow. Tonight we celebrate. Days later, when the treaty was formalized, and representatives from the southern territories had arrived to renegotiate the trade agreements they had previously offered. Sable found herself in the council chambers as a full participant, rather than an observer. Alpha Halvard himself attended, along with his daughter Ingrid. "I will admit," Halvard said, studying Sable with frank appraisal, "when Torsten declined my proposal for alliance through marriage, I was offended. Now I understand why. You have proven yourself beyond any political match could have accomplished." Ingrid, surprisingly gracious, added, "The stories of your trials have spread through all the territories. You have become something of a legend. The Luna who rose from nothing to stand beside the Alpha King. I did not rise from nothing," Sable corrected gently. "I survived trauma, yes, but I am not defined solely by suffering. I am defined by what I chose to do afterward, by the strength I found within myself, with help from those who believed I was worth saving." Halvard nodded slowly. "You have wisdom beyond your years. I am pleased to offer formal alliance between our territories, not through marriage, but through mutual respect and shared interest." The treaty was signed that afternoon, witnessed by both councils. What Ragnar's aggression had failed to destroy, diplomacy and demonstrated strength had secured. Weeks passed into months. Sable grew into her role as Luna, discovering talents she had not known she possessed. She mediated disputes with fairness that earned respect. She trained young warriors, teaching them that survival required more than physical strength. She established safe places within the castle for those suffering abuse, ensuring no one else would endure what she had endured in silence. Torsten watched her with undisguised admiration as she transformed not just herself, but the pack's entire approach to protecting its vulnerable members. The laws he implemented at her suggestion became models that other territories began adopting. "You have changed everything," he told her one evening, as they stood on the battlements watching the sunset. "Not just for me, but for all of us. We changed everything," Sable corrected, leaning into his warmth. "You saved me first. You taught me I could be more than what I had been told I was. And you taught me that strength is not the absence of fear or pain, but what you do despite them." Marin appeared in the doorway behind them, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes twinkling. "Your Majesties, the Council requests your presence. There are new proposals to review regarding the expansion of the protection laws to outlying villages." Duty called, as it always would. But as Sable walked beside Torsten through the castle, they now ruled together. She felt only gratitude for the path that had led here. From kitchen servant to Luna. From broken girl to powerful woman. From invisible to essential. The scars on her back would never fully disappear. The memories of 15 years of abuse would always lurk in dark corners of her mind, but they no longer defined her. They were part of her story. Yes, but not the conclusion. She had survived. She had healed. She had found love and purpose and belonging. And now, she would ensure that others found the same. That night, as the full moon rose silver and bright over the castle, 2 wolves ran through the forest together. One large and dark, one smaller with distinctive silver markings. They ran not from danger, but toward freedom, their howls blending into a song of triumph and joy. The Alpha King and his Luna. Partners in every sense. Leaders of a pack that had learned to see strength in unexpected places and value resilience as highly as any bloodline. And in the castle behind them, in quarters that had once housed a terrified servant girl, a single candle burned in the window. A light in the darkness, a beacon for those still suffering, a promise that change was possible. The end.